Hi guys, and welcome to the Smart Talk. I'm your host, Simon from Audacity, and this is a new series of shows that we're going to bring to you topics that are important to us, topics that are going on at the moment, why we do things the way we do things. We'll have other members of the team on the show, we'll have other hosts and other people, and we'll just generally bring you as much information as we can. And I'm really excited about this, actually. It's the first time I've done it, and we're going to get into it. So today's topic is necessity. And necessity is an important topic for me because people view it differently. And what I view as a necessity is something that you bilaterally cannot do without. Like, oxygen, water, food. Some people view Netflix and, takeouts on a Wednesday and all the rest of it. And to me, there's a vast difference between sort of what is a need and a want and what is a necessity. And if we take it back to like the dawn of time, we evolved over time, and these are necessities, coming from water to land. It's a necessity to learn how to breathe on the land. It's a necessity to evolve and adapt to situations. And these necessities come from learning, come from mistakes. And as we grow, we learn. As we learn, we grow. And it's just really important that we find a necessity where it's needed. And to relate this to crypto, I'm going to roll it back to 2008 because I'm going to start at the beginning of the journey, and I want to take this show through the journey. So in 2008, we all know that the banks are up to some really shady stuff. We know there's a global financial crisis, and we know what causes it. So we've all heard this 1,000 times. And basically, the banks were wrapping up mortgages that they knew were going to fail with mortgages that were good. So they were sabotaging their own investment products, in essence, because they were just making so much money. And they were loving it. They were loving life. But they got off scot-free, they were bailed out, and then the year after they're paying they're getting $13.9 billion, profits. A year after a financial crisis, because they got bailed out and they just weren't hurt and they weren't scathed. Yet there was a couple of sacrifices, Lehman Brothers and a couple of the smaller brokers, but the majority of the big boys came out relatively unscathed. And these are things that are beyond our control. So we have no control over bankers and what bankers do, but they do have a massive influence in our life. They affect money markets, they affect lending rates. So they are institutional in our life, but we have no control over them. And this is something that gave birth to Bitcoin. Now, incumbents will argue that it's pointless and it's a bubble and it's not necessary. But crypto enthusiasts and I think more free-thinking people will argue that it is an absolute necessity. Because if we can't trust the people that are the gatekeepers to our financial stability, then we have to take our financial stability into our own hands. And this creates a bit of an anarchy situation for me, where the mainstream media is portraying the Bitcoiners as sort of like just delusional and terrorists and criminals and all the rest of it. And it's not real money and it's not real this and it's not real that. And the Bitcoin enthusiasts are basically fighting back saying, well, it is actually tangible. It's secured cryptographically. It's provable that it's mine. And I don't need anyone's permission to use it. And that to me is a necessity. I mean, crypto to me is a necessity. It gives financial access to everybody. And it doesn't need a permission. And as long as you can find an off-ramp somewhere, then you can turn that Bitcoin into cash. Now, this is where we need this compromise. And this is why it's a necessity for crypto to evolve now. Because without this compromise, then it's never going to evolve. It's going to stay this sort of movement that never quite finishes and never quite reaches its potential. Because without that access to credit and without that access to mainstream banking and without that access to the traditional financial systems, then it's just going to fester in this sort of slight rotating pool that it's going through ups and downs and ups and downs. Yes, more and more people are getting involved and it is fantastic to watch. But without the regulation, without the access to credit, without the ETFs, without the access to financials, nothing's going to change. But it is a necessity that we make the compromise. because we need to bring some AML regulations. We need to bring some counter-terrorist financing regulations. We need to bring some of the tools that are in traditional finance over to the crypto world. We need to bridge that gap, and it's just an absolute necessity that we do that. One of the main reasons why we launched as a company, one of the main reasons we sort of did what we did, is because, again, it was out of a necessity. So 2021 was the DeFi year. The crypto markets were doing incredibly well. Everybody was doing well, and everyone was pumping money into projects without doing a lot of research, without doing a lot of sort of due diligence into what you're doing and what you're looking at. And the inevitable happens with all things, exactly the same as in 2008 with the housing market. This bubble eventually pops, and it is a bubble. And it's a bubble because it's not born from sustainability, it's not born from common sense, it's born from people just wrapping stuff up and chucking it out there with no real consequences, because it doesn't really affect them. So if we look at projects that have, the term rugged, if we look at projects that have rugged, or projects that have switched and baited and moved away, and things that have been hacked, and leaders that have stolen, and then we look at more legitimate projects that have done exactly the same. I mean, there's people at the moment that bought into Strong and are just like, okay, I've now no longer got a node. There's people that still don't know if they're getting the money out of Celsius. There's people that have invested in multiple products and they just don't know where they're going with them. And they get very little information from their teams. So there's a necessity now to actually bridge this gap and to do things differently. And when it comes to accountability, when it comes to what you should expect from the people that you're actually involved with, we don't stand for these things in the real world, and why we stand for them in crypto is just absolutely beyond me. The good points are fantastic. You've got yields that you haven't got access to, and you've got products that you haven't got access to. But the bad points are horrific. You've got money tied up in unsecure code. You've got teams that just do exactly what they want to do. There's no accountability. And where does that cycle end? It's horrific. And decentralization as it stands is a myth. Okay, when every project starts, it is centralized. It is dependent on the project leaders. It is dependent on the people involved. Satoshi mined the first Bitcoin without him doing it, without him starting that movement. So in that instance, it's a very centralized product. 1, 2, 3 people are mining it. They control the network. And everything decentralizes over time. So developers are the gatekeepers to decentralization. So they're the people that can make decentralization happen if they choose to do so. Bitcoin is now a massively decentralized network. Ethereum is a massively decentralized network. Now, there is massive centralized stakeholders in all of these ecosystems, and there is in every ecosystem. But from a necessity point of view, we now need to evolve past where we've been, and we need to start to cooperate, and we need to start to look, and we need to start to find what people are looking for. We need to bring products to people that they can actually use instead of multiple steps and hoops that they have to jump through. And all of these things will come over time, but it is a necessity now and not just a need. So I thank you for listening to me rambling. There will be more content coming, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Take care.